Once again, good morning. Welcome to our session entitled Learning from the Experts, a panel discussion on lived experience. My name is Jill McLay, and I'm the Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Research for the Reese Jones Center of Foster Care Excellence at Children's Health. And I'm also a member of the statewide collaborative on trauma-informed care, care of the Policy and Practice Work Group. This session will be moderated by Judge Rob Hoffman, and our panelists include Alexandria Fuller, Monique Gonzalez, and Leroy Barones Soto. You can review their bios under the same tab as the Zoom link. In order to give our panelists as much time as possible to share their stories and experiences, we will not have time for a question and answer portion during this session. Now I will turn it over to Judge Hoffman.
Thanks, Jill. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you for this great Judicial Trauma Institute, and especially for this panel that everyone's been looking forward to so much. We're here today to learn from our experts, and really the purpose of this session is to talk about the entire CPS process and learn from these experts what they think is trauma-informed about the process and maybe what is not trauma-informed about our process as well. So we're going to start by letting each panelist tell us a little bit about themselves and why they were interested in serving on this panel here with us today. I'm going to ask Leroy to start. Go ahead, Leroy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leroy Barones Soto. I'm a student at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. I was formerly in foster care. I spent about 5 years in and out of care. And I was interested in serving on this panel because of the importance of being a trauma-informed and creating a trauma-informed system.
Thanks, Leroy. We really appreciate you being here with us today. And everybody loves Leroy's screen, so we can see UTRGV in the back. It looks great. Thanks, Leroy. Monique, would you like to go next and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Monique Gonzalez, and I am the chair for the parent collaboration group here in Texas. And I am a parent who has had or who had my children removed in the past. And so I was interested in serving on the panel just to make sure that the parents' voice, and so the parents' voice is very present, and to make sure that everybody kind of understands how this affects everybody as a whole, not just children, CPS, but parents as well. So just kind of to give that perspective.
Thanks, Monique. We really appreciate that. We're glad you're here, and we're all looking forward to hear from that perspective for sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Alexandria, I'm going to call her Alex from this point forward, but Alex, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandria Fuller, and I'm a former foster youth and a current law student at Roger Williams School of Law. While I was in foster care, there were a few things that I saw that I didn't like, many things. And that's why I'm speaking here today and why I decided to go to law school, so we could work on policy changes and policy reformation, so we could have a trauma-informed system and a system that reduces, reduces trauma.
Thanks, Alex. Well, we're going to start at the beginning with our removal and first hearing questions, and I'm going to stick with Alex here for this next question. But tell us, Alex, what do you think about the investigation process, how that relates to trauma, and all the decision makers that make decisions about removal of children from their homes, how they can be more informed about how that process is traumatic for children? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. So I have a list of things here. The first thing is how it affects children, and the things for me that affected me the most is that I actually had a lack of removal, which caused more trauma and increased my developmental issues, my response issues, and emergency removal was necessary because of the lack of removal. So when you have a call, really investigate that call. I feel like there are a lot of kids that stay home when they shouldn't stay home, or they're returned home when they're still in a dangerous situation. that that emergency removal caused me trauma. It made me not trust the system. It made me not trust authority and our emergency responders, because the police were called so many times and I was just left at home. And finally, when the emergency removal had taken place, I actually needed to tell the police officers that I was going to harm myself to be taken into foster care. So it's quite extreme for me. So maybe please consider those things when, excuse me, maybe please consider those things when the investigation starts, when a call is made.
So when you are interacting with all the people that are involved in the investigation, you talked about police officers and CPS investigators. Do you feel like that they were responsive to listening to what you had to say and the story you had to tell? And how did that affect the trauma that you experienced? Absolutely
not, sir. In the few times that the police were called before the emergency removal had taken place, each time my mother was able to evade the police and tell them some story and they believed me. And there was one call before the actual emergency removal in which I told the police officers I was going to run away, and they told me that I would be arrested while I was in danger, while I was bloodied, hair was missing from being pulled out. I looked like I'd been in a fight because I was in a fight. And they just sent me home. And then I lost trust even more so when the removal actually happened, because they're going to take me back inside when I literally was bleeding from my face. And I had to tell them that I was going to harm myself. So no, sir, I did not trust any authority or police officers to care for my life or my safety.
All right. Thanks, Alex, for sharing that story with us. Monique, would you like to tell us your answer to the same question from the parent's perspective, how that initial investigation, that first interaction that you have with someone from the department may be as traumatic for a parent?
Yeah, so in our case, it was just that like one time investigation, and it led to removal. But it was chaotic, to say the least. Like one of our children was removed at one location, and we were told, like, you have 15 minutes, get home, say goodbye to your kids, because we're right behind you. And so not knowing how to express that to our children, coming home and just being like, okay, real quick, like, grab what you need. CPS is about to get here. They're about to take you. And us not even knowing how to process that. It was extremely hard. And then, that regardless if you're a child, a parent, or who, that trauma stays with you. Like Alex was saying, it led to her not being able to trust authority figures and stuff like that. On the opposite end of it, our removal wasn't anything like that at all. It was, us being kind of off guard, very, very different. But to date, we, as well as our children, have issues with, like she said, like authority figures. Someone can't come knock at the door because we go into like panic mode. And it's been already, 6 years since this happened. So just, I think, keeping that in mind and trying to make it, I know sometimes it's really hard, but trying to make it as not non-traumatic, I guess, if that's even possible, as you can, because this is something that's going to stay with this child and this parent and the entire family, even extended family, for the rest of their lives. No matter what the situation is, a removal is always going to be traumatic. Especially, I know it's supposed to be like parent perspective, but as a parent, seeing your children growing up and not being able to trust anyone, not being able to talk to anyone, that's not something that you want, whether you do get them back or you don't. They are going to grow up with that. And that's just something that's very, very scary. And that trauma, even though you go through counseling, even though you do, the steps that you need to take, it doesn't ever fully go away. So just keep that in mind in how you're working with each family. Each family is very different, and remembering that is what's going to be key to making it less traumatic and less stressful for everybody involved.
So yesterday we heard one of the presenters say that CPS workers, and I guess initially investigators, should try to do their best to make sure that they treat each person as an individual and have a human relationship instead of a case or a problem that needs to be solved. What could that first worker that you had an encounter with have done differently to reduce that trauma for yourself and maybe for your kids as well?
I think just maybe having more, like a little bit more time to process what's going on. Make sure that you are, I would say, if possible, I know sometimes with safety issues, that's not, ideal, but if possible, sit down and have, even if like an officer has to be present, but sit down and explain to the children and to the parents, hey, this is why we're doing the removal. You normally there's like a process where you'll be able to see each other in a few days or be able to have some sort of communication, like explain that to everyone so that it's not just like, oh, we came in, we grabbed the kids, we'll be in contact. That is the worst way to handle something, because it leaves so many unanswered questions. You feel like you're never going to see each other again, you're never going to talk to each other again. And that's terrifying, right? Not just for the parents, but for the kids. I like I said, just maybe having that conversation of, hey, this is the steps, this is what's happening from here until, a few days when we see each other. And this is why, being honest right up front from the start. A lot of times, like I was explaining the other day, we can't talk to our children about the case. So them hearing firsthand what's happening and in front of us will, I feel like, have accountability for the parents when they do speak to their children, and be able to lessen the blow of, yes, you are being removed, but it's not the end of the world. You are going to still have communication. You are still going to see each other, and we are going to try to fix what is broken.
Would it have helped if the worker would have maybe given you a little bit of advice about what to tell your kids or how to interact with your kids at that point?
1000%. Like I said, looking back now, I wish I would have done it way different, but it was just, we were in panic mode. We were trying to speed to get home because we wanted 15 minutes to turn into 17 minutes. Like it just, it was scary because we had no idea how we were going to explain to them because they were so young. And then the way we did it, I feel, was completely wrong. It was just like, grab a whole bunch of stuff. Some people are going to walk in the door, they're going to take you, and we don't know what's going to happen. And so everybody melted down. Like it was me, my mom, like we all melted down. Like we broke down, and we didn't know how to explain that to them. So they left super, super, super on high alert, crying, traumatized, not knowing what's going on. And we didn't know how to fix that or how to, or what even was the next step from there. So it was just horrible.
Well, thank you, Monique. That sounds a little bit similar to Leroy's story. If you'll tell us about that initial event and interactions you had, Leroy. I know you had siblings, and maybe how the worker could have allowed you to communicate with your siblings that would have reduced trauma for you.
Yes, my story was a little similar. I actually still remember when the department picked us up. It was November 15, 2005. I was barely 10 years old. I was the second of my 7 other siblings. I remember the department just showed up. They saw us alone because at that time, my father was in jail, and my mom, she was pretty much all we had, to help us out. She was working. She had to, and she was actually also undocumented. So she really couldn't find a job where she could work from, let's say, 8 to 5. So she had to work pretty much all day and couldn't provide for us at the time. So then when CPS found us, they just showed up from what I recall, and they called the police because, I mean, it's 8 of us total, and we didn't want it to go with somebody we really didn't know who they were, what their intentions were. It was like, it felt like being kidnapped by that person, that caseworker. When they separate my siblings and I, it was difficult because, like I mentioned, my older sister and I were kind of like the parents in a way, since when my mom wasn't there, and it was hard to not being able to protect them from wherever they were being sent. They, in the first placement, they put us in everybody was in different foster homes, so we didn't know where they went, where were they, what city. The cities were always separated even by county. And I remember the first foster home, I also wouldn't eat. I couldn't eat. I just remember going through a depression. I cried for days. Even after my foster mom got after me for crying and missing my parents. And to me, I think that was the most traumatized part, being with a stranger and kind of bullying you for, expressing your feelings about, I mean, them breaking. I felt they broke my family at that time. And yeah, I mean, even to this day, we still struggle with those connections as a sibling group, because of ever since CPS separated us that first time, we don't feel like a family anymore. We are very, I don't know, it's separation. So like, I know where they live, they know where I live, but it's kind of hard for us to feel that connection anymore. We don't, like if they need anything, they won't call me. Recently, my mother was killed in Mexico, and that's the only time we bonded, trying to think of, she really loved us. It wasn't the way that the department made it seem, that she never cared for us. She actually just never got the help she needed, either psychological or whatever services she needed to get. And like I said, right now we don't talk. And I think that's part of that first removal where, it broke us. And I actually found a photo from CPS from our first visits of the removal. In that photo, all of us were smiling, because as children, we didn't see the bad in our parents. That department made us see that wrong in our parents. And so I think that's hard to realize now that I don't have none of my parents with us.
Talking about that first removal, is there something that the department could have done differently with your interaction between your siblings that perhaps would have not caused that trauma that has such long-lasting effects? Is there something that the workers could have encouraged you to speak amongst yourself with your siblings, or some advice they could have given you, or information they could have told you about your placement that would have been beneficial then?
I think that they should have first gotten our trust, because like I said, to us, they were strangers. So, I mean, if they were thinking of removing us, they could have probably talked to us and my mom, I know, of course, at the appropriate age level, to see maybe there's a plan that could be done for them to help my mom get assistance with daycare, or something, so we won't be alone or neglected while she's at work. I also feel that the department and pretty much everybody involved, because ultimately the court is the one that approves those emergency removals. I think the judge should have paid attention to what are the long-term consequences, because there's a lot of research that shows what those consequences are, and I don't think a lot of attention is paid to that. So I've been paying close attention to that.
So being able to hear your story, I know that initial separation on that very first day has had pretty tough, long-lasting consequences. So how critical is it for judges and other folks in the system to make a really important decision about placement at the very beginning?
I think it's very important. Um, you know, it's one of those where it's hard. I don't know.
What difference would it have made with your siblings and your relationship if you had been able to be placed together, maybe even remain in the home, as you said, or placed together, all of you in one family or one shelter?
I think that would have been better because I think that we would have all been together, taking care of each other. We wouldn't have to worry about what those strangers were going to do, like hurt them or where were they taking them. One of the things that I did forget to mention was that I also had two other step siblings that during CPS removal, they got lost in the system. So we don't know where they are. I've asked the department and, so if they would have placed all of us together, we wouldn't have lost communication with them. And now we don't know where they are. So being together, and I know some of the families here in our region, we're Hispanic, some families are big, and I know it's hard to kind of keep us together. We understand that. But I think that at the same time, maybe keep half and half together, or maybe encourage more visitations with the parents. I think that something we always lacked, and I know my parents always struggle with transportation. So even though the court saw it as they weren't trying, in my opinion, and from what they will tell us, is that they tried. And I mean, it's hard. I'm 26 and I still don't drive. I get very paranoid being out at times still. And it's one of those, that I wish that the department would kind of see more of the positive in the court instead of the negative. I think sometimes the system is too judicial, too you cannot to scare parents instead of trying to help them achieve their goals and permanency outcomes.
Thanks, Leroy. Well, Alex, thank you for sharing with us a little bit of your story about the trauma you experienced about being left in your home. The question I wanted to ask was about what you want judges and lawyers to know about the trauma that kids experience during that whole process. You talked about that a little bit, but also how important it is that first initial decision about that first placement that a child may go to upon their removal. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yes, sir. So in order, I want to work on placements first, and then how judges and lawyers should address the placement. One thing I failed to mention was that my oldest brother was actually removed and then placed back into the home. And I think that that should have been something that the system focused on. I don't know if that was not documented well or what, but I think it was really important to know that he was removed from the home, placed with other family members, and then my mother would just go to our family member's home and then harm my brother, and then he was placed back into our home. Secondly, when I was taken from my mother's home and I slept at the CPS building, I think that was when it was still legal. I was asked if I wanted to go live with my biological father, who is a documented sex offender of children. And I think that is readily Googleable information, and that question shouldn't have been asked. That further harmed my trust with authority, because how could they not know that? How could they not know that I was not going to be safe? How could they not look that up? I can't say that I had a negative experience with my foster mom. I was only in one home, and I love my foster mother dearly. I still talk to her pretty much every day, if not every week. But I can say my experience with my first caseworker, I had two, wasn't the best. She made me feel like I wasn't problematic enough, which made me ignore the problems that I had. And then it also stigmatized foster kids. The conversation that I had with my first caseworker was that I didn't have any problems. So for quite some time, I thought that I was okay, and I was not. As far as things that judges and lawyers should know, I was never allowed to be present for any of my, any of the judicial red tape, if you will, that happened with my mother. So I never interacted with her in a courtroom or with a judge. I met with my attorney, I think once or twice in the year and a half that I was in care. And my mother was actually stalking me while I was in foster care and came to my job outside of my school and I'm 26 years old and I have paranoia. I want to return home to Dallas. I live in Lubbock right now. And I'm afraid to, because I feel like every corner that I turn, she's going to be there. And I feel like if I had the opportunity to tell a judge, there's just something so powerful about a judge. You know that they can do something. That my mom was following me, they can make her stop. And I still suffer with that trauma today, that if I'm going home to visit an aunt or something, that I can't tell anyone that I'm home. I can't post a picture because she'll be around the corner waiting to say something to me or to hurt me. And I didn't have that. I didn't have the freedom to tell someone in a seat that I wasn't safe.
Thanks, Alex. That brings up a couple of questions I wanted to ask you about. I didn't really think until you mentioned it. When that initial caseworker asked you, would you like to go live with your father, and the fact that that was a very traumatic question for you. What could the department have done differently in that circumstance? I know you talked about just them having better information. Was that scary, maybe understanding that nobody really knew your situation? Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Absolutely. It feels like there should have been, and this was, I think, 2011 or 12. It feels like there should have been a cohesive system that they could just kind of look into, see our siblings and see these records. And it felt like it wasn't. They called my grandmother, who then denied me. And the words that she said were, "I've already been through this," basically, something along that line. And that should have put the police and the CPS workers on notice about where I could and could not go and where I would or would not be safe. And then they proceeded to then ask me if I wanted to go live with my father without simply looking up who my father was. So just for me, it almost felt like they weren't trying. They're just like, "All right, well, we got you here. We don't really want you anymore. So where do you want to go?" So,
At the very outset, that trauma initiated and really built upon itself. There's a big push statewide, which is a good thing, to get kids with their relatives. But it sounds like maybe in your circumstance, that was a bad decision as well. How careful should courts and judges and attorneys be when they're making the decision to place kids with relatives?
extremely. Either you said it or Leroy said it. I think we've all discussed it in the past before, that trauma is an individual thing and each person has their own story and their own background, their own life. And so doing deep research into who these families are and how the children actually feel about their families and what help could be given to the parents, because some parents, as we can see, really just need direction and they are good parents. In my case, that was not the case for me and my family. And had they looked into that, I think I would have felt safer and I would not have as many social issues and just trust issues in general.
So you would have liked to have been asked that question yourself about placement with a relative and not necessarily just the parents. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. I would have liked for them to, I don't want to sound rude because I know that people are here and I don't want to sound like I'm antagonizing anyone or insulting them, but I really wish that they would have done their job truly, respectfully.
I don't think anybody's going to be offended by your saying that, and I appreciate the fact that you're telling us that. You talked a little bit about talking to the judge, and when we were planning, we talked quite a bit about how important it is for you to get to speak directly to that judge. We have attorneys and Casa advocates and caseworkers and therapists that do great jobs for our kids. But I think you and Leroy both stressed how important it is to be able to get directly in front of that judge, ask questions, and tell your story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. I don't know if I still have this feeling as a law student. I don't know if there's just an aura about a judge that even children, we know that you are powerful. We know that you can make a change and you can make a difference in our lives. And there's just something about a therapist, that the foster care therapist, and maybe it's because they weren't CFCBT trained at the time, that didn't feel, it almost felt fake and it didn't feel safe. It felt like you could tell them something and they would say, "Just take a deep breath, meditate. Have you taken your meds?" Like something like that. Whereas you tell a judge and they know that this is wrong and this needs to be fixed. And even as a child, I knew that. So I think it's important to give children, that, it's almost like giving the children power over their own lives, giving them some type of autonomy when they've had everything taken from them.
So if our kids and parents see the judge as being the ultimate, maybe most powerful person in the circumstance, how important is it for our judges to be trauma informed when they're interacting with kids?
It is the number one thing. Knowing that the decision that you make, which you already know, could change our life down the road. I wonder what type of person that I would be socially, outside of having good grades and being a professional, what type of person I would be on an interpersonal level, and how much fear I wouldn't have, how much fear I wouldn't have of authority, knowing that I could just pick up the phone and call the police if something was happening. And I know that they would listen to me if I could tell a judge that these things weren't working.
Thanks, Alex. Well, I'm going to shift back to Monique. In a second, I want to ask, when we moved into the status hearing, service plans, services planning stage, what was most helpful to you, Monique, from your caseworker? But before I do that, I just want to wrap up with the investigation stage. Monique, is there anything else you can think of that would be helpful for parents to reduce trauma during that initial investigation stage? And then you can talk about the service planning stage.
So just to kind of go back to what Leroy said, I think keeping the kids together is something that needs to, I get it, the situation's not ideal. It's never going to be, there's never going to be a perfect timing where 6 or 8 kids come into care and there's this magic foster home that can take in all of them. I get that. But separating these kids when they've already been stripped from the only normal that they know, whether it's a valid removal or not, right? Whether, these kids were being, for instance, like in Leroy's case, a parent that just needs those extra resources, who doesn't know how to reach out, who doesn't have access to that, trying to keep the family unit together is huge, right? Obviously, of course, like in Alex's case, there's times when that's just not, the right thing to do. But they've been stripped already from their normal, whether it is, like I said, valid or not. This is the only normal that these children know. That's it. They know nothing but this, neglectful life. They know nothing but this life that they've just been removed from. Like he said, he was used to being the parent. So, I have a daughter that's like that to date. Like she's the mini mom around here. And I'm like, gotta remind her, you're not the mom. But, for a child like that, having been just removed from the only normal, been removed from your parents, and, like I said, the situation may be valid, but these kids don't know anything else other than the situation that they're living in, right? So to them, they've just been stripped from everything that they know. And then to be stripped from their siblings, which is, they were removed, I'm assuming altogether. And then to have, okay, well, we got you. Now you go here, you go here, you go here, you go here, you go here. That is so traumatizing. My kids were split up. One was newborn, so he went to foster care, and then the other ones went to shelter. But even that shelter was like where 2 of our babies, well, we call them babies because there are 3 younger ones and 3 older ones, but 2 of our babies were in the same facility but across the highway. And then the rest of them were, in like the normal pod or whatever you call it. They'd see each other on Sundays for 1 hour. Like that's horrible. And, one of my biggest fears during all of this was that bond that they shared, that family unit, that, that connection was going to be broken or was going to be tarnished, because Like he was saying, like Leroy was saying earlier, you in that situation, and I've spoken with my children and have heard this, it almost becomes like a us versus them, right? Especially if you're put in a bad situation where, let's say, one is in a foster home that isn't, you know, rainbows and butterflies. There are things that happen, or another one is in a situation where they are being, hurt behind the scenes or something like that at one of these locations. Then it becomes, well, why was I targeted and placed here when the rest of them were not? And so I would just say maybe, and this might not even just be a suggestion for caseworkers, might just be a suggestion like systemically, right? Trying to find foster homes and placements that are dedicated to larger families and are dedicated to, for when and if that does happen, these kids can stay together as much as possible. Um, that's just something that I did want to stress, because I know that in our family, like I said, we have 6 kids. That's a lot for the normal parent. For us, it's our normal. But just trying to find a way to keep them as close together or together. And if not, just to go again off what Leroy was saying, making sure that they have access to visits. These children didn't do anything wrong. So we need to stop making them feel like they did,
Well, I think you've done a great job of really emphasizing how important that placement together is, but also interaction and family time with parents together as well. What else would be critical for parents to have when we're talking about working on their service plan, the reunification process? What could the department or courts provide to parents to reduce trauma as we're moving forward to reunification?
So something that I've always was something that with as a parent and with the parent collaboration group, something that we've always, and it gets brought up all the time, that I feel we could use, from the very beginning, is almost like how the children have Casa, the children have ad litems, the children have attorneys, the children have, all of these different things, right? I would love a program where there is an actual like advocate or an actual mentor, or just some sort of um, like liaison for the parents. Because when, for instance, I'm going to use my own case, right? When we jumped into it, and I say this a lot in almost everywhere we go, the first thing that we did was Google like CPS and CPS removals. And if you ever search that, that is like the worst thing you could do. It's like WebMD, you're gonna die. Well, that's like the worst example of don't do it ever. But when you don't have guidance, you look for it wherever you can find it. And so I would say having someone in your corner to kind of say, hey, okay, I get it. The most traumatic thing that could have happened to you just happened. But from here, moving forward, it's not about what happened in the past. It's about your future and making sure that you're making the steps and doing what is needed in order to get those kids back in that home safely, right? And kind of letting them know, okay, so you're going to have a court hearing in 14 days. This is what that court hearing is for. You're going to have one in 60 days. This is what it's for. Because yes, you do get handed like a little pamphlet with a little kid on the front, but it's coming from CPS and the investigator who just took your kids. So if I'm being honest, the first thing we did with that pamphlet was chunk it in the trash. I didn't want to have anything to do or read a pamphlet on how I'm supposed to be feeling. So having someone to be able to talk to and to be able to say, okay, this is what's happened. This is what's going or should happen. Now, the outcome of this case is up to you and how you handle the next, few months or, something like that.
Great. Great. That's a great advertisement for those parent mentor programs. Thanks. We heard a little bit about Alex talking about being present in court and speaking to the judge. Would you tell us how important you feel that might be, being able to go to court, speak to the judge? Or do you have a different opinion than Alex would have?
Yes, sorry, Judge, I couldn't hear the first part. So, but yes, I do think that it's very important to have that communication with the judge. Like my peers have mentioned, they're the ones with the ultimate authority to make a decision that can be a lifetime decision. One of the things that I never really liked was that they always say in the best interest of the child. And when I was in foster care, I never knew what it meant. I always thought it was what it meant, you know, what as you read it. Uh, and then our attorneys were supposed to talk to us, but they would only meet us the day of court. They would never meet with us at school or in the foster home or wherever, right? So to me, it was like, are they really telling the judge what our needs really are? How does the judge know that that's what we want? Um, so I never felt that we had that communication with the judge. I do feel that it would be very helpful because, like I said, it's very judicial. The process is very scary, even for children, for us, for parents. And I feel that if I had the opportunities to speak to the judge, I would probably trust the judge more than CPS or my own attorney, because I feel that the judges are very neutral. You guys make the decisions, and um, I feel that the judge would hear firsthand what I need, not what my attorney thinks I need. And I feel that often happened in my case. I never felt that what I told him was being said in court. One time I did express, I had two judges. I like my last one because I felt that he really listened to what my needs are. And I feel that if I asked him for example, one time I felt I was over medicated, and they requested that they examine those medications, for example, because I used to feel like a zombie with those. I thought I was over medicated, and the foster parents, always push in CPS, take your meds, and they used to be helpful, but there's times where you just want to be normal and not have to, do what they tell you instead. Like, so I was glad I was able to express that, and the judge was able to help me with that.
Thanks, Leroy. Well, we have a lot of advocates listening here today, attorneys that represent kids and parents, but also, folks from our Casa programs across the state, and we're fortunate to have those folks. What advice would you give to a Casa volunteer who really, their job is to look out for the best interest of children? How can a Casa volunteer interact with the child and reassure that child that their voice is being presented to the judge by their Casa? Do you have any advice there?
I actually had a Casa, I think like maybe once or twice. I actually like coming to Casa. I felt that when I had a Casa, I did feel that they were our voice. Because like I said, they're not CPS, they're not that, those people that work for CPS or police. So I feel that when I had a Casa, they would visit my foster home. They would even bike with us. They would, they will treat us like if we were part of their family. They would treat us normal, in other words. And so when the Casa treated me like sometimes their own children, I think that helped me gain their trust and know that they're working in our best interest and not on the department's best interest. So I would say to get that trust from them.
Would it be nice to hear back from the Casa volunteer maybe after the hearing? Hey, here's what I told the judge you wanted me to tell them, and here's what the judge said back. Would that have helped as well?
Oh, definitely. Anytime you're in court, sometimes, I don't know, for some reason, judges speak very, like, I don't know, very soft, I can never understand what the judges say. So to me, getting like a summary of what was discussed wouldn't give me, it will help me because anytime I went to court, I always went to court with hopes of going home. Sometimes I would pretend I was doing perfect in school in the foster home just so that they can release me to my parents because I thought that I was the problem at times. So, I mean, sometimes, we get those false hopes. And so to answer your question, I think that if we got like a summary of what went on and what can happen and things like that would have helped me kind of be a little more confident and trusting of the judicial system.
You know, Alex talked about this a little bit about, you know, the questions that you're asked in therapy and how you interact in therapy. Lots of times a judge may think, well, if the therapist is telling me how things are going, I don't need to directly hear from the child. Do you want to speak about that for a second?
Oh, it's Alex, sorry.
Well, I meant for you, Leroy. Did
Oh,
you?
sorry. Yeah, so for therapy it was kind of tricky. The court always, well, CPS always says that the court forced therapy. In my opinion, to me, it was always unhelpful because I always told the therapist what she wanted to hear, just so that she could close the case. And I don't think she will keep our information in private, which will always affect us in a negative way, either with more medication or the department giving more services, or sometimes even blame our problems in our parents. So to me, I think, I know it sounds bad, but lying to a therapist was kind of like a survival kind of thing, you know. I never trust therapy. I still don't. Even when I struggle, I rather go to a friend I trust rather than a therapist and I'm doing perfectly fine. I mean, when I struggle, like even with depression or when I get sad, I go to a friend, I go for a walk, and I'm no longer in medication. So sometimes it's doable without, you know, having the pressure of being kind of run by the department or the state, because it does feel like a prison.
Right. Well, that sounds like a good segue into the normalcy question I'm going to ask Alex about in a second. But Monique, just quickly, I wanted to ask you, we talked about our kids being able to speak directly to the judge. How did it feel to you to be in the courtroom speaking to the judge? And did you feel like your voice was able to be heard before the judge?
So in our case, we weren't ever able to speak to the judge. Our attorneys spoke for us, and I hope he's not listening, but if he is, I'm sorry. Honestly, I had a horrible attorney, horrible. So nothing of what I ever said or what I needed to get through to the judge was ever actually relayed to him. So that was hard and frustrating because there was so much that I felt accomplished in that we were doing in our case, and so much that, you know, we had and wanted to express to him directly, but we were always told, don't talk, stay quiet, sit here and let us do our job. And so in doing that, it was not a good experience at all. I would have loved to have had that communication with him.
So was that a traumatic experience then from beginning to end, having to go into court but not being able to say what you wanted to?
Very much, very much. It feels almost like a system of just blocks being stacked against you over and over and over and over and over and over and over. You're told, do this at this time, don't do this, do that, do this, do that. And so you almost can never have that opportunity to use your voice that you want to use sometimes, and you just can't. And I get it, trust me. I've sat in court several times afterwards. I went back and I'm like, this is why we're not allowed to talk. But but there are things, you know, for example, I'm going to use my example real quick. So with our service plan, we were done with everything other than therapy by our 60-day hearing. Sorry, I just dropped something. By our 60-day hearing. But the judge never knew that, because that wasn't something CPS was saying, and that wasn't something that our attorneys wanted to say. Now, why, I'm not sure. But I would have wanted him to know that, because we had an amazing judge. And, you know, I would have wanted him to know, because I feel like that would have made a huge difference in our case, and him knowing that we were just, you know, out there and really, 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 you know, we were serious and taking this as serious as we could about getting our kids back. And so I just would have liked that, but we were just always just told to hush, sit down, be quiet, don't say anything. Some of the only questions we were allowed to answer were questions like yes or no, like, I see here you completed this service, congratulations, and then we would, thank you. But it wasn't anything else other than just yeses and nos and very, very minute things that our attorneys would allow us to answer.
Thank you. Well, Alex, we talked a little bit about normalcy. You knew this question was coming, and a lot of what you've talked about today seems to me to stress and emphasize the importance of normalcy as much as possible when you're in the system. Would you like to touch on that subject and also tell us what normalcy means to you and how that normalcy might have minimized the trauma that you experienced?
Yes, sir. So I'm still working through a lot. Now, as a 26-year-old, I think the easiest way for me to make friends is like law school, the gym. That's my whole life. But if it wasn't for my foster mother being the type of mom that she was, I think I would have more issues than I have now. Normalcy for me means allowing a kid to be a kid. My foster mom, we did talk about Karen, we did talk about the case, but as much as she could keep away from me, she did. And I'm grateful for that. I was allowed to play sports. I was allowed to be in debate. Here I am with that. I was allowed to play golf. And I hope that, I said this in our meeting, but I hope my foster mom doesn't get in trouble for this, but I was allowed to like go out with my friends. We had a trust network set up so she would know that I wasn't doing anything I wasn't supposed to. And I was allowed to do the things that my friends were doing, even though still now and then I didn't feel like I belonged because I just always felt that I was different because of foster care and abuse. And I didn't think that my friends had experienced those things, so it's something that I couldn't discuss. But because of those things, I think I'm okay to do what I'm doing now, to sit before judges and caseworkers and talk to you so freely about these things. However, on the negative side of it, the lack of normalcy and the trauma that I was caused from my emergency removal and just trauma in general, I can't even put it into words. I'm sorry, verbalize how difficult it is to still sit here, even though I can freely do it, and wonder if people are actually listening and if they care because of the things that I experienced. So it's really important when we talk about normalcy that we're not just putting it all on the foster parent or on the actual parent that is getting their child back, but we're kind of putting it on the caseworkers, and we are putting that responsibility on judges, or putting that responsibility on the attorneys to make sure that this system allows for children to have normal lives in or outside of foster care.
Thanks, Alex. In a bit, we're going to let everybody wrap up, but I wanted to ask one question before we do that, talking about closing the case and at the end of your case. And I'll just stick with you, Alex. What did you experience at the end of your case that you would hope other children in the system would be able to experience? And maybe also, what would you change about the end of the case to reduce trauma for kids? Alex, will you answer that question? And then I'll ask it of Leroy next.
Yes. So this is, again, back to my foster mom. You guys should really have her up here instead. She's great. I did not know that there was a choice for foster kids to like stay at their house at your foster parent's house after 18. And she told me, if you don't want to go, if you don't want to move away and go to college, you can stay here for, I don't remember how long it was, and I will keep you. I could cry right now thinking about, excuse me, I'm trying to stay professional, but it just means so much that we did have someone who actually cared about us that much. And vetting foster parents like that is extremely important for a kid to just feel like they're safe when they haven't felt safe in the home that they lived in previously. And when other children don't feel safe in their own foster homes. What I would like to change is that when we leave, that we are fully informed about our case, like top to bottom. As adults, we are informed, because I don't have any closure still. And sometimes working through these traumatic situations with my therapist, it almost feels like I'm being dramatic. And to have, I'm so sorry, my co-counsel's meowing. To have someone confirm with me on paper that these things happen to me and I'm okay to be as hurt as I'm okay, as hurt as I am it would be nice to have something, I'm sorry, just a hard copy of what happened to me. I'm so sorry.
I think you've said it very well, and I know that the sentiment that you're expressing is coming across loud and clear to our group. Thanks, Alex. Leroy, same question for you. As your case wrapped up, what good things happened, but maybe also what things would you change to reduce trauma for kids as cases close?
Yeah, I was a little similar. Thankfully, when I was aging out, I had a caseworker who I actually met during a panel, actually during my first panel that I did. And when I was about to transition, she became my caseworker. And I literally consider her like a sister. I know that department has a lot of rules and red tape about what you can do with the young adult, but to me, I think that was the most important thing because that caseworker, she didn't treat me like another case. To her, I was a human. She put my interests first. I even asked her to close my case, and even after she closed it, she still kept in touch. And when I left foster care, of course, I stayed there a little longer while I graduated high school after my 18th birthday. But I was scared to come to the university because, first of all, I never thought I was getting out of foster care. I thought it was just something where I was going to end up being there forever. So when I was coming to university, I told her, I'm very scared. I don't know if I can do it. And she took time out of her schedule to come with me to the dorm to help me move in. And that day, she stayed with me the whole day until I relaxed. And by her doing that, I knew that she was always the best caseworker that I had because, and I still talk to her. We still keep in touch. And I know a lot of the young adults right now, they don't have somebody like that, somebody they can trust. We have a lot of trust issues because, the system kind of, teaches that work in survival mode. So, having that person that will be there for them, whether the judge, the attorneys, it will be very beneficial. I always tell people at the university or when I speak that it takes a village because a student, they might have one person, but they might need more than one person to be able to, accomplish their goals and succeed and then don't end up in jail or
Thank you, Leroy. I appreciate getting to hear your story, and you have some great advice for everyone. Thank you. Monique, same question for you. What good things happened at the end of your case? We know ultimately it was successful with reunification. What good things happened that reduced trauma, or what suggestions do you have about closing cases that would help families experience less trauma?
So, yes, thankfully our case was successful. We did get our kids back. But a few things did help along the way. And one of the biggest things that I would suggest as a parent is that, so when a CPS case ends, so does all of the services and all of the help that the family was getting during the CPS case. And so my suggestion would be to allow those services to continue so that that family doesn't come back into care. And what I mean by that is, so we just had, I'm going to assume the 12 months is a timeline here, but we just had a year of speaking to counselors, speaking to caseworkers, having a team help us to get into a better place. And then your kids are put back with you. And so in my case, I was super, super, super excited to get them back. And then I got them back. And then I had no idea what I was doing all over again because I didn't have them for so long. So it makes no sense to me as a parent to place these kids back with me and then just kind of say, oh, you did great, here you go, bye, see you later. No, like I would suggest having services continue and be ongoing, you know, at least for a year or whatever the time is after the case closes, because that does two things. It continues to help the family while they are building and becoming a better family unit, right? While they're together without any supervision. And two, it helps to not have these families come back into care, not have repeat offenders, or, you know, however y'all say it, I don't know. But so for instance, at the end of my case, I signed up for a parenting program here in San Antonio. And that parenting program was 18 months, right? Which seems like, oh my goodness, that's a long time, right? But that was kind of how we helped CPS feel a little bit at ease, was that we were going to have someone in our home for 18 months after our case closed, and they were going to be able to see, like, you know, it's a second set of eyes that works alongside with CPS, kind of to know, hey, you know, this family is continuing to need this resource or not, or and that for me, for my family, was great, because there was several times that I called them out on it. I'm like, okay, you're helping me, I need your help. Like, so having more of those programs available and having those services continue, I think, is crucial, and not cutting them off right when the case cuts off. Also, if I can say, at the end of our case, we were presented, you know, by our judge, by CPS, by everybody, as like, you guys did an amazing job. Now, why don't you come back and help parents that are in the same situation? And so that helped me personally. I can't tell you my husband's side of it, but me, it just made me feel like 1,000 times better. It made me feel like I mattered. It made me feel like I did something amazing, and it made me want to come back and help families that are in the same situation. So I think doing more of that, giving people more of an opportunity to come back and use their voice and use that, you know, that position that they were in, that was probably the hardest thing that they've ever been through, you know, whether it was family reunification or termination, either way, but having, giving them that voice and that power to be able to say, you know what, I just did something and I feel super accomplished. Let me not go hide in my room with a blanket over my head every time the doorbell rings. Let me go out and explain to people, you know, why they need to make this okay and come out of this better, right? No matter what the situation, no matter what the outcome, the goal is to come out of it a better person, right? Always, that's always should be the goal. So I think having those kind of programs, you know, like I said, like the parent collaboration, like the, you know, youth program, grandparents, foster parents, just giving everybody an opportunity of coming back and maybe serving that same community that they just got out of is huge. I know that here our judge pushes it all the time. And so we had actually done sort of like a pilot program here in San Antonio, where we said, okay, so this is a group of people who are, you know, being referred to, like, for instance, parent collaboration here in San Antonio. And then this is a group that not necessarily isn't, but it's just is not pushed and told about it, right? And so the outcome of this group was just the numbers and the time period that they got their kids back and the attitudes and all of it, it was just night and day, completely different. So having judges, attorneys, caseworkers, everybody on the same page, on the same team, and not feeling like everybody is against each other is, I think, probably the biggest thing that's going to help everyone come out of this less traumatized and less impacted for, you know, a long time. But yeah.
Monique, you've done a great job today. I appreciate your willingness to tell your story. Jill?
A huge thank you to our panelists and our moderator for that incredibly informative and thoughtful discussion. You gave us so much to think about, and we really appreciate your willingness to share with us.